which is session 5 on leveraging technology and startups. And I have the proud privilege in inviting on stage our distinguished chairperson, Mr. Mukesh Gulati, Executive Director, Foundation of MSME Clusters. Let's put our hands together to welcome him. Inviting Mr. Sachin Joshi, Representative, UNIDO Regional Office. A very warm welcome to you. Inviting eminent speaker, Ms. Rizani Aziz, Chief Executive Director at Factors Public Relations, Sri Lanka. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. And inviting Ms. Shruti Das, Marketing and Communications Head with NESCOM. So, ladies and gentlemen, the topic for the session is leveraging technology and startups, and time duration is approximately 1 hour, which includes the opening and closing remarks by the distinguished chair and presentations or deliberations by all our eminent speakers, and question and answers in the end if the time permits. And before I hand over to the chair, a quick round of introduction. Our distinguished chair, Mr. Mukesh Gulati, is Executive Director, Foundation of MSME Clusters. Ms. Shruti Das is currently heading Marketing and Communications for NESCAM Foundation, has over 18 years of experience in marketing, public relations, communications and advocacy, and has the rare distinction of having worked on national policy influencing the area of Child Rights and Juvenile Justice Act in India. Ms. Rizani is a PR Chief Executive Officer at Factor PR Sri Lanka, is a PR practitioner with over 27 years of experience in public affairs, corporate and financial communications, issues and crisis management, advocacy and brand PR, delivering successful communications campaigns for a portfolio of leading multinational companies, government and the private sector bodies and organizations. She has been volunteering her time for women entrepreneurship development for over 30 years as a member, board member and chairperson of the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Sri Lanka. In 2005 to 2006, in 2001, she headed the task force of the chamber to create the SAARC Chamber Women Entrepreneur Council, SCWEC, under the aegis of the SAARC Secretariat and SCCI. Among the global forums that she was involved in included Vital Voices, steering committee member of South Asian Women Entrepreneur Symposium, both a part of Hillary Clinton's Global Women's Initiative, GWI, in addition to several women's entrepreneurship forums, both globally and in South Asia. And Mr. Sachin Joshi is representative from UNIDO Regional Office. And over to Mr. Mukesh Gulati, sir, for your opening remarks and to carry forward the proceedings.
Do I need to come there or?
So there, wherever you're comfortable.
Works. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with this august gathering here on the stage and also everyone here in front of me. The topic is quite interesting in technology and startups. Now, when we are looking at technology, usually the first thought which comes to our mind is machines, equipment, tools, maybe the technique on how to manufacture certain things, so essentially meaning skills. But technology, as on my right side, Shruti will tell us, is also a lot about MIS, using e-commerce platforms, using technology, which means digital technology. But it would also mean maybe a lot in terms of how we manage our things. So technology is more to do with technique, and technique essentially can be seen across different facets of whether you do marketing, whether you do finance, whether you do manufacturing. So technology is not just limited to manufacturing, but technology is sort of ubiquitous in the way we essentially look at it. And when we are looking at startups, which is another word which comes into this, this is a term again which at least the government of India would say that startups are seen more in terms of very technology oriented startups, but startups can also be very micro enterprises, households, who may be doing a very small work, minimal work with the husband and wife working together, but when they have ambitions to grow and make India Atmanirbhar, and also build up their own scale in terms of volumes of what they do, where they reach out. So, a lot of people that we work in our organization, which I represent, which is called the Foundation for MSME Clusters, we realize that a lot of work which our women folk, particularly in the rural areas, work for is essentially whatever they produce, they sell it very locally in the same Haat Bazaar. And if they have to move from their local area of Haat Bazaar to, let's say, the state capital or a bigger city, let's say nearby, which is even 70 kilometers away, not very far off, it's a challenge because when you need to sell maybe 70 kilometers away, the volume suddenly grows up because you can't take 4 tokeries, for example, to a nearby city. So obviously certain volume has to justify that. You need a transportation system. You need logistics and supply chain systems. These are the big terms that we use, but these are very relevant terms for them also. So how do they manage it? What kind of technology do they use? And they are also startups therefore. So I would essentially suggest that when we are talking, let's try to look at our framework of who we are talking about, both in terms of the industrial enterprises as well as household enterprises and very small enterprises, micro ones, who may be doing a business of just about 4,000, 5,000 rupees a month. And if they have to move up to, let's say, 50,000 rupees a month, that's a big transition for each one of them. Now, how, let's say from NASSCOM, we'll hear, of course, how they can use IT, maybe through very simple things like WhatsApp, maybe getting the prices from the market, maybe finding out certain kind of information through simple Google search. So those are very simple things that we can essentially do. And I was speaking to Sachin Joshi, and he was telling me that he is heading a project in UNIDO, which is essentially on inclusive and sustainable industrial development. So I guess that fits in very well, at least in the manner that I was just explaining, how very micro enterprises can move up the value chain and move up and help enterprises. So it was just about last month when I went to a place in Jharkhand, which is called Dumka, that's a district there. And when I met a few small artisans, it was so heartening to note that, when I was being introduced, he said, do you know that ये ज़मीन मैंने अभी खरीदी है पिछले महीने. So it's a small place, of course, for his own household. Earlier I was living in the outskirts of the village. Now I have moved into the village area and I now have my own space. And you can see now I have a cemented house because the person had a thatched roof earlier. And from there to move on to that journey, it was like 7-8 years of journey. And he said, मेरे बच्चे अब private school में पढ़ते हैं, अंग्रेजी पढ़ते हैं. So when you see that kind of a transition building up, I think that builds up certain amount of context. But essentially there are also some factory type of enterprises, and that is also very important because you need different levels of enterprises for the entire industrial development ecosystem to move up. So let me just introduce you briefly about who I am and what organization I come from. So our organization is called Foundation for MSME Clusters. It says Foundation of MSME Clusters, but it is for, so that's a minor correction, but nevertheless. So in India and also everywhere, including Sri Lanka, I am sure, there are lots of towns and villages which are known by a particular product. So अगर आप चंदेरी साड़ी की बात करेंगे, तो चंदेरी is a village. But that village or a town is essentially a cluster because there are so many people who are working exactly on the same type of a product. Most of us may be very familiar that 90% of all the woolens that we wear, all are produced in only one town, which is called Ludhiana. If you talk about Kota Doria, for example, which is in Rajasthan, if you think of all the undergarments, particularly the banyan and the undergarments which are being made, and also, of course, the t-shirts, for example, 90% of all exports happen from Tirupur. And all the bangles come from where? Huh? Sorry? Hyderabad gives you that lakh wala bangle, but you know the glass bangles come from Firozabad. Almost the entire stuff. So it's very unique that while technology is available everywhere, people are there, skills are there, investments can be made, and yet somehow you find that there are 6,500 such clusters in India which are specialized in terms of what they do. So all the medicines and all the pharmaceutical stuff that you get all comes from just 4 places in India: Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Indore and Dehradun. Almost everything comes only from these places. Why does it not come from some other place? The rest of it is just about 10% across rest of the world. So we essentially work in clusters. So wherever there are towns or villages which specialize in certain kinds of products, so we just go there and spend about 3 to 4 years and identify where there are key problems related to marketing, finance, packaging, technology, machinery, tools, R&D, whatever, and just focus on that and see how those plugs can be, those gaps can be plugged to take it forward. So with that, I'll stop the introductory remarks, and that I think would possibly help us understand the context that we can build upon. Maybe there would be many new things that I was not able to place it before you, but I'm sure our speakers here on the dais should be able to help us move and expand the frontiers of what we are talking about. So may I request Shruti ji, if you can possibly initiate your remarks. So we have 10 minutes each. I have already taken my 10 minutes, and maybe once we are concluded with our 40 minutes of discourses, the last 20 minutes we'll have some amount of interaction. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mukesh. I think that was a beautiful context, and I'm going to go back right to the start of the conversation, how you started defining what technology is and what it can do. I think in my 20 years of experience in the tech sector, where worked with multiple corporates, large ones, small ones, startups, I have redefined the way I look at technology. And I think today, if I were to say one thing that I would say about technology is that it is the great equalizer. It is what makes everything inclusive. It is what creates opportunities. And that's how, in fact, at NASSCOM Foundation, we also look at technology like that. Like wherever technology can be used for inclusion, wherever it can be used for creating opportunity right at the last mile, and where it can be used for social impact. Having said that, I think 2 key areas considering this particular discussion. One, technology for startups. In India, what we've seen is we are traditionally a country where a lot of engineers are born. And, despite having the largest number, the highest percentage of people who study engineering as in their main subjects, the number of startups in the sector, in the technology domain, are actually quite low if you look at world statistics. And that's a shame, because we have a great entrepreneurial mindset. We have the right education, but somehow maybe the way infrastructure was in our country, the way the mindsets were, we weren't able to use it for entrepreneurship. But I'm glad to note that, I think that's a trend that's changing. Even the current government has picked it up, and they've, now have quite a few initiatives that look at creating entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs from different sectors. So that's heartening to see. Even at NASSCOM Foundation, what we're doing is we work with young people quite a bit. What we are doing is we're trying to use technology to create that entrepreneurial mindset. and that involves a lot of mentoring sessions. It also involves a lot of incubation. And another great statistic that is, one trend that I'm seeing from all of this is that the number of engineers and young people who want to actually start an organization using technology are doing it for a social cause. That number is going up, and it's incredible. So I think, that's something that really requires us to encourage that trend, build that trend, incubate that trend, so that we see success there. And that's what we do through all our innovation programs at NASCOM Foundation. It's called the Tech for Good program. Coming to the second part of what Mukesh touched upon, I think women at the center of it all. And I see so many of you here, and I know you're gonna agree with me. If a woman decides to do something, and she decides to learn, and she decides to do it for her family, she will make sure that it's done, right? So and that's another trend that we are seeing post COVID in all of NASCOM Foundation's programs. So we used to run a program called NDLM, National Digital Literacy Mission. Before COVID started, we saw that maybe 75% of people who attended digital literacy programs were actually men. That trend started to change, I think, 2020 onwards. Last year, when we pulled out the statistics, we found that actually 65% of the participants in the digital literacy program are now women. And that's a huge jump. So what that has also done is...
You actually halved the men, 70% to 35%.
Yes, but I'm glad to see that statistic, because what it has also done is that after they've got the basic digital literacy skills, they've started looking at skilling themselves for running a business. And we see the direct impact in our women entrepreneurship programs also. So today we run programs for women entrepreneurship. There are actually three key programs, where one is basically about digital literacy. And again, Mukesh mentioned it. Sometimes the most basic barrier to a woman picking up a business is actually not knowing how to make a payment online, or just picking up the phone and accessing a government scheme. There are lots of schemes that are there for beneficiaries today to start their own business, but women don't know how to access it. So what we are doing is giving those simple skills that we take for granted, actually, that we are giving those simple skills to these women. So whether it is financial literacy, digital literacy, or market linkages. When I say market linkages, I mean there is a very specific program that we run for women artisans in Madhya Pradesh. And I think one of the basic things that they wanted from us is, how do we connect to an Amazon, to a Flipkart? How do we put our products online? How do we take it forward? So what we've realized is that one of the basic asks, there are a lot of organizations today who are giving funds to women to start these household enterprises. There are a lot of government schemes also that is encouraging that trend. But what happens is, in about 2 to 3 years, once they've started it, they're not able to sustain it. It fizzles out, because they're not able to scale it up, take it to the next level. And what we're doing at NASCOM Foundation is that we are making sure that these women upskill themselves through technology. They get the basic understanding of how to use technology to kind of, access the right tools, get the right information, make payments, whatever it is, but go out there. Sitting in their small house, maybe in a village in UP, they are able to access things that their competitor in Bangalore is doing. So that is the kind of level playing field that technology brings to them. And that's been our endeavor at NASCOM Foundation. I'm gonna take a stop here. Even though I'm in the field of marketing and communications, I think 10 minutes is too long for me to speak. So I'm gonna give it forward to Rizani, and ask her to contribute to the conversation.
Thank you, Shruti, for some great thoughts. I loved what you said. Technology is an equalizer, and I don't think it has been felt more than post-pandemic. It was, and so my thoughts to you today, and what I'm going to say is in two parts. One is my story and how technology impacted the business I'm in, and secondly, I'm wearing the hat of being with the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and give you some stats, share with you where women in technology post-pandemic stands. So firstly, 14th March 2020 was when Sri Lanka announced the lockdown. We had hardly any time. We were just given 24 hours to basically pack up our office and start operating from home, which meant that, so I'm in the business of public relations. And in public relations, Shruti will know, everybody will know the basic of getting content out in printed matter. A press release has to have multiple appearances. There are announcement releases, there's thought leaderships, there's all kinds of things, and that was our bread and butter. Now, what happens when you go into a lockdown for 3 months, when newspapers don't publish for a month, and then they slowly limp back into business, printing like half the number of pages. Business pages in vernacular, the mass media, were almost like one a week. It's because the shock of the pandemic, and nobody could get to work, nobody could get to offices. Certain publications were made essential services, but people were grappling with, having family, having basically personally feeling the impact of COVID-19. So chaos across the world, across Sri Lanka. One trend became very clear, and that was the vastly accelerated digital adoption. So what did we do? We had to take meetings from home, obviously, and then adopt Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts. But then, in a team of, I have a team of almost 27, 28, we didn't realize that some areas where people lived, the connectivity was almost zero. So getting on Teams calls means, I remember getting irritated when one of my colleagues from media monitoring, while on a Zoom call, I could hear dogs barking and cows mooing. And I was like, where the hell are you, Akram? And he said, Rizani, I have no connectivity in my home. The connectivity drops. So I'm near the well. So, I said, okay, Akram, whatever you do, don't talk to clients from the well. Make sure that you get to some place, you could even travel. So, it was in his vicinity. So, complete curfew. And mandatorily so. There were army drones going ahead to see, it was that strict in Sri Lanka, to see if anybody was venturing out of their homes. Of course, on the other hand, we had grocery trucks and all coming over, and everything changed. Grocery shopping, banking, the whole system had to adapt to the new normal. So, coming back to my business, the business of public relations. So, everything had to be digitalized overnight, and simple steps, from meetings, from developing content to suit online publications. You couldn't write 600 word, 700 word press releases. There was no, who was going to read on a phone or a laptop or a tab such huge content? People are not in the mindset of reading such long stories. So overnight we had to condense the stories to suit the online media outlets. We had to convince clients that this was the way to go, because they would say, but we want every single, and Shruti, you'll understand, clients want every single word in their head and in their heart represented in black and white. And so they had to be convinced that this was not going to be so. And then they had to also be told what are the alternate media outlets. Lots of hybrid video outlets started, hybrid news platforms, but another thing became abundantly clear, and that was the proliferation of micro-influencers. And micro-influencers are nothing more than young, and most of them were young really, because they're the ones who adopted to this whole new digital world, whose opinion was becoming more and more important. So they were on Instagram, they were on Facebook, they were on various, Facebook I would say, various social media platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, and everybody was listening to them rather than reading the newspapers. So that's a trend now. Micro-influence. In fact, there are people who would listen to what Elon Musk says on Twitter rather than read the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. So that's a trend that we need to watch for. So the shock of the COVID wore off, and businesses that were able to adopt to digital platforms thrived, while the traditional retailers, businesses, and all had to rethink their whole business strategies. And that's where I come to our women and our women membership at the Women's Chamber. It impacted them terribly. There were those in hospitality who didn't have business for over 30 months. Again, adopting the whole digital mindset and moving to a new area of marketing becomes imperative. It's not just a nice to do. And programs such as the UNSCAP one that Dr. Ratna mentioned this morning would be really, really super helpful. I just want to leave you, I just scribbled out some stats which I thought I'll leave with you all today, just as a poser, so that you know where the constraints are. So 8 billion is the total global population. 8.3 billion mobile connections, because some of them have more than one. 5 billion internet users, 4.6 billion active social media users. But the internet, that's globally. We have a great, when we say we, I'm talking about South Asia, has a great mobile penetration and reach. But internet adoption is only 45 to 46%, as opposed to 97% in North America, 70% Central Asia, 72% in Southeast Asia. So my friends whom I met from Singapore yesterday can be proud. Hi Lillian, hi Carol. 72% Southeast Asia, and South Asia is only 45%. Why? 66% in South Africa. So where are we on that? And then social media users versus population is also low in South Asia, 34% in South Asia, as opposed to 82% America, and so on, and 72% Southeast Asia. So we are almost half of the ASEAN region. And you know, we're saying go digital, go adopt this whole new technology, IT, everything, and yes, we must. But are we geared for it is my question. What is the infrastructure and policy support we have in place when my Akram from office has to go to the well and have cows mooing and dogs barking for him to get on a Zoom call? So I'm just leaving you with that. It's something for us to think about from our region.
Sachin, I heard you about the inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Maybe you can briefly tell us about that also, and let us know about how your organization's work is not only developing, I would say, prototypes and you know, individual people, but also scaling it up with maybe at the policy level, at the institutional development, because as a UN organization, your role therefore is far bigger and better in terms of strengthening the various countries' capabilities to take it forward. Maybe you can bring in that angle also.
Sure. Thank you, Mukesh, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, the organizers, for inviting UNIDO to share some of our thoughts with all of you. Well, since I represent UNIDO, let me tell you what I do there. We have an initiative on inclusive and sustainable industrial development with the Ministry of Commerce. And it's just 1 year into the initiative, many initial months into administrative matters to get it off. So it's actually just the initial months, and we are trying to get the ball rolling. But what I'm going to share with some of you is, of course, as Mukesh, you said, what as a UN entity we do and we could do in this space. But I'm also going to draw on my earlier experience of working on sustainable business while spending 12 years at the Confederation of Indian Industry, and also later as the policy head of the Business 20 as part of the G20 as well. So I'm going to put all of that together and leave few thoughts behind. So now, speaking of technology, what really makes the tech sector so important in the central theme of this conference, which is that we increase the contribution of women in the society and the economy. And the important reason there is that it's a two-way street, right? Technology, of course, again, Shruti, since you mentioned it's a great equalizer. What it also does is that it opens up many opportunities for women to participate in the society and economy. But it also helps women to contribute and bring in a lot of skills and even personality traits, which men either don't bring them to table at all, or men have different characteristics, which women bring. So I think these are it's a two-way street. It's what technology brings to women, but also what women bring to technology. I think that's very important to underscore. Thank you. You flagged some statistics. Maybe yesterday you heard many more statistics about women participation in the economy, top management, etc., etc. There are many statistics available there. I won't read out any of those statistics, but I'll point to sort of inferences that we can draw from all of those. One is that the absolute numbers of women participation in economic activity, including enterprises, is absolutely dismal. It's true for developed parts of the world and, of course, the developing parts of the world. In fact, on some indicators, the developing parts perform better than the developed parts of the world. So when we look at women participation in business, there is no developed part of the world. There is no developed part of the world, right? Every part of the corner of this world is actually developing on that indicator. The second inference that I could draw is that the growth rates, however, the growth rates of women participation in organizations, in economic activity is growing, and it is growing at least more than 100%, which is really, really encouraging. In some cases, it is 250%. What I mean by that is, so say if you were to look at what is the rate at which more and more women are working at IT firms and things like that, they are in those 3-digit percentage points, which is good because it far exceeds the rate at which men are coming into that workforce. So which is good. Now, if I combine these two inferences, it tells us of one thing, that for all these decades, a lot of the initiatives that we have taken, private sector, public sector, civil society, all of us, on increasing women participation in society and economy is actually working. right? Otherwise, this high growth rate wouldn't have happened. But then, if we continue at the current pace, then there are other studies also available, including the famous one from the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago, that it would take women another 100 odd years to really get to the parity in the top management of the companies. We don't have time. Seriously, none of us in this room will be around in 100 years unless, medical science, makes a lot of progress. But that's besides the point. I think, the loss to the society and even purely as a GDP indicator is so huge when the women are not in the workforce, they're not in the economic activity. We just can't afford to have that exclusion anymore. So we really need to accelerate the pace. Now, how do we do all of this? And I have a few policy suggestions, as also Mukesh asked me to do. But before I get there, I also want to mention another unemphasized data which usually gets lost on lots of data that we have on diversity. And that is basically that within women groups, there is a lot of inequality. Right? So when you look at groups characterized by the geography, economic, wealth, progeny, caste, religion, color, even sexual orientation and gender identity, on all of these subgroups, there are huge inequalities. So if you are a woman in the mainstream, then you are at a huge privilege over a lot of these subgroups. So we need to look at that as well. It's not just about men and women. It's also about women within women groups. There are a lot of these issues. Okay, now I come to 7 policy suggestions. And I must admit that these are from my work with the G20 in the last couple of years. And these are actually recommendations that have gone from the Business 20 group to the G20 for the leaders to take account of. So first of all, what countries need to do, and I'm glad that there is a mix of countries here, evaluate and amend the national policies on equality to ensure that they protect the rights and equal opportunities of women. This is not to say that we don't have these policies, but the point is to take stock, see what's working and what's not working, and then make course corrections. 2, prepare and implement a comprehensive women in STEM roadmap with the strategic objective of increasing the pipeline of women in high-skilled jobs. Cultivate early interest in science, technology, engineering, math, basically STEM, and build women's aspirations and skills to increase participation in most of the in-demand job roles. The third is implement policies for employers that set goals for employing women in the organization at the different levels, but also become transparent with their disclosures and tell the public and the regulators that this is the kind of gender diversity that we have across the length and breadth of the organization. Fourth, eliminate barriers to access to expertise and finance for women-owned, women-led MSMEs, as well as informal entrepreneurs, which Mukesh eloquently mentioned in his remarks, as well as women-founded startups through affordable legal support, increased financial literacy, and a range of financial instruments. One thing that I noticed when we were developing these recommendations is that we try to make some of these services affordable to women, but then we don't really try to group all of those together and then take as a combined service for a cohort of women entrepreneurs and employees to access, which would further improve the accessibility and affordability. The 5th policy recommendation is to include a diverse cross-section of women at all stages of policy making and implementation. Unfortunately, it's the men who are making the policies for women. I recently read in the papers that this national committee, which is looking after some women initiatives. I think it's not related to business, but it is related. Sorry? Yes, child marriage, but also I think domestic violence. The committee that has been set up by, there's only one woman. All the other are men. Please, change that, right? I mean, it could be reversed easily. Uh, and there is no lack of expertise, women on those issues. Sixth point, mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic on women's economic opportunities. The biggest loss of the pandemic has been on women as compared to men. More women are out of the workforce and economic activity. More startups and firms owned and led by women, were put out of business as compared to men. So, and unfortunately, when we look at all the policy support across the world, it's not only true for India. There has not been a gender lens, right? So we really need to go back and revisit some of that support. And the final point is increase the gender equity in research and development and develop gender-sensitive ethical guidelines in key areas such as health and advanced technologies. So these are 7 very specific, policy recommendations. Maybe we need to, go back to our leaders and say, this is something where you really need to put, their foot on the gas as well, so that we can accelerate the pace to increase the participation of women in economic activity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we had some very illuminating thoughts from all our panelists. And before I request for questions from the audience, there were 3 things, 1 question each from my panelists before we throw open the floor for questions. I want to start with Ms. Shruti, and I want to specifically check up with her on the own account enterprises. Own account enterprises means family-based enterprises in which there is no hired labor. So it's just maybe husband, wife, or maybe children who are. So you talked about technology as a great leveler, and we did a small policy paper just a few weeks ago, where we tried to look at how these very small and tiny enterprises whose loan requirements are maybe in the range of 25,000 to 50,000 rupees maybe. They possibly need it from microfinance institutions, smaller loans. I just wanted to check up if NASSCOM Foundation or NASSCOM has been engaged in working with the financial institutions in enabling this kind of a linkage between the seekers of these small loans and the institutions which are possibly providing it. And if you can also throw some light on the controversy which is coming up now with this e-commerce booming up and its impact particularly on our own account enterprises, where a lot of women actually run small shops, kirana shops, and CAIT, which is essentially saying we need a regulator to make sure that we are not mowed down by this. So if there's something that you can educate us or throw light on that, on these 2 aspects of loans and the small traders, and how maybe our own account enterprises can essentially use technology to sustain themselves, to build themselves, to be able to maybe either partner with these e-commerce platforms or maybe fight with them with a equal standing. Thank you so much.
Both very interesting questions, and I think you've come right to the heart of the matter in terms of challenges where you see. So
because here technology is a disruptor.
yes, technology can also be the disruptor if not used correctly and if it's not in the right hands. And but in both these questions, let me first address the first one. When it comes to on-account enterprises and the challenges that we see mostly in that sector, NASSCOM Foundation found that while almost like 80-90% of the population at the last mile, and especially ones who are running these kind of enterprises, the smaller ones, on account ones, family-led ones, they have mobile connections. They have, their business runs primarily on word of mouth. But what they don't have is only actually mobile internet. Only 58% of them have mobile internet. And that becomes the challenge. What we also found is the reason why they don't have mobile internet is actually because of not because the town they're living in or the village they're living in doesn't provide it, but because they don't know how to get to it. Access it, the way they can access these forums, they can access these already existing opportunities, they don't know how to. So what we at NASCOM Foundation are doing is we work with these people to understand how can we make them digitally enabled, in the sense that if they have to take a mobile internet connection, they need to have an Aadhaar card, they need to have some basic documents in place. How do they use it in a responsible manner? How do they have it first in the first place? Also, you're talking about bank loans. Today there are multiple schemes by the government which are readily available. The barriers to actually getting access to those schemes is not very high. They're low barrier schemes that are there. You probably only need your ration card to get to it or something like that. But again, why they don't get to it is because they don't know about it. They don't know where to access it. So we do a lot of those programs where our entire objective is to get them to be digitally enabled, to be digitally skilled. Because if we are looking at digital India, it has to go from not just digital India, the digital Bharat also needs to be enabled, and that entire gap needs to be bridged. So those are two key areas where we're working on. When it comes to your second point, the big ones eating up the small ones, it is, I think, going to be a central question anywhere such technology is prevalent, and we just have to find a way to make it work for everybody. We see the opportunity in it too, because what technology does, today I'll give you a story about this woman entrepreneur who's an artisan in tribal Madhya Pradesh. So we went to her, we asked her, what do you need? Her first question was, tell me how I can send my designs to people on WhatsApp. That's all she wanted from us. And we were like, okay, we'll do one thing better. We'll tell you how to connect to an Amazon or a Flipkart and get your products showcased on those. So we understand the need there. I think organizations like NASCOM Foundation, many bodies within the government, I know Niti Aayog's aspirational district program is, great in that sense. There is a lot being done to ensure that the journey from, creating that, the first step is obviously creating that micro enterprise, to create that business. But making sure that that journey from creating that enterprise to sustaining it, we are able to help them through that. And I think that is going to be the key. So how do we get them to run a program beyond 2 years? How do we get them on the same plane as maybe somebody sitting in, somebody in a tribal area of Madhya Pradesh and somebody in Bhopal should have the same access to the market. And that is what we are trying to do. Absolutely. So that is exactly what we are trying to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that was very useful. Yeah. Let's move on to now Ms. Aziz. I understand that you represent the SARC Women Chambers, right?
I was a founder, founding member, but I'm a member of that right now as well, but
Wonderful.
not actively.
Okay. So since I'm familiar with that, because I was the founder, executive director of the SAC Chamber of Commerce and Industry for a year, so I'm familiar with your domain. So you have a lot of maybe other small industry associations who are sort of federating and aggregating into what is called Federation of FCCISL, and then FICCI, and then all these bigger associations having multiple small associations. So my specific question to you was, you talked about this statistics and how there is in your own business also where 27 of your people had to overnight change. So my specific question was that since you have many associations who are part of your chamber, what is their role in sort of helping the women entrepreneurs to access loans, to undertake what is called digital literacy, to help market their products, maybe to help send the designs to the potential buyers, find buyers? Is there something that various industry associations or smaller associations, whether they are cooperatives or groups, what has been their role and what is the role of your own chamber to help them out?
So thank you, and I just also want to mention that the president of FCCISL is in our midst, Shirley Pereira. She was, if you missed the last panel, she's okay, yeah. So the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce is also a member of FCCISL, and individually, I would say the business associations, the regional women's chambers and all are doing their bit, but the reach is not enough. So what perhaps could be done? So while everybody is doing dribs and drabs in various pockets amongst various segments, and in a way everything that's done is good. I must say whatever is done is appreciated, but collectively there could be a bigger push, a bigger reach in institutionalizing this kind of learning, I would say. And there's an opportunity there. It hasn't been managed to that harnessed to that extent, but definitely a bigger push has to be there. So I think what I would say, and from my experience, is that it requires the business chambers, the entrepreneur associations, to work closely with the regional counterparts in establishing it. So there has to be a proper structure, proper organizational structure, with a kind of public-private partnership with support. But I would say there has to be an umbrella approach to it.
Long way to go. So Sachin, you touched upon the, I would say, the cultural dimensions very significantly. You talked about, in a committee, for example, women are not there. So we did a study with Copenhagen Business School very recently, and they basically tried to study why is it that there are very few women entrepreneurs. You essentially touched that. It's about 10% in India, 9 point some percent or 10.2% or something. So 90% of all businesses are men-owned. Whereas in terms of lots of sectors like textiles, for example, ready-made garments and so on and so forth, women workforce participation can be as high as 50% or even more for that. Bangladesh, for example, is so much women dominated in terms of workers, but in terms of women owned enterprise, it's a serious issue. So that's what they try to study in the Indian context. Thank you so much. Yeah. So when they studied this, they came up with very interesting observations, and they said that the cultural dimension is so critical. So while schemes are there by the government of India, but whether those schemes have to be harnessed or not is decided by the men in the house. Whether or not a lady would be a part of the self-help group, would be decided initially, and there may be a lot of resistance by the men as to why you're going out, why are you setting up your own business at all. And there are certain societies in India which are matrilinear, certain are patriarchal, but the very fact that if you do not have the house or property in your own name, that could be a major reason why the bank would or the financial institution would say no to you for the loans. So I was wondering whether your inclusive and sustainable industrial development program of UNIDO has been able to come up with maybe any models or programs which can then be scaled up by the different ministries or the institutions in India. And are there certain lessons which can be drawn upon? Because the 7 policy prescriptions that you said about are essentially for the government to take it up, but a lot of time the government essentially would like to learn from things which have already been done and showcased in terms of scaling, the way maybe NASCOM Foundation must have done it for lakhs of enterprises for digital literacy. We are also, we just initiated a digital literacy program for 3 lakh people in India, just started few months ago. We want to complete that in a year and a half. And I think we would certainly like to learn from the model that you had developed or the program that you had developed. So I was wondering whether UNIDO has been able to showcase something which is at a scaled up level, which the government can or the banks can essentially take notice of and then draw inspiration from, please.
Well, the short and the quick answer is no. But don't be so disappointed. As I said, we are still at the early stages of this initiative. But we don't have to really wait for this initiative to produce results and then showcase what can be taken up at scale. I think there are already many examples in this country, even around the world, in comparable countries and societal and economic systems from which we could borrow lessons, put it into some kind of a policy construct for the government to then pick it up. But there, coming back to the point that you mentioned about cultural transition, so again I would, and even to my own self, I would pose that question and hence challenge that, you can come up with these nice policy prescriptions, we can have plenty of, anecdotal evidences on the ground, but if cultural minds, and the mindsets and everything is a roadblock, then, how are we going to change that? Because that's not always going to be organically changing. Again, it will take, 100 years, and probably that's why, we have that estimation that, for women to have more representation at the top managements across the world is going to take more than 100 years, comes probably from there. So how do we address that? And I think there is one systemic undercurrent that could push the culture in that direction, and that is the growing unemployment among men. I think that is going to be, it's a very big concern for social stability also. But somewhere, that could become the drive to increase women, because ultimately women, and there are again anecdotal evidences, right? So when the man of the house, is out of the job or doesn't care to work and bring bread home, it's the woman who takes charge, fights this guy, and takes ownership of the family and the economic activity. So I think the scale of unemployment in this country at least has reached that level where you're going to have more and more women perhaps push that cultural transition. The other thing is also, though our session has mostly focused on technology, is those technology combined with startups are bringing in the work culture which is, of either, you're either working as a contractor or a part-time worker and things like that, which also allows women to take more of those kind of economic activities, which are very different from the conventional employment modes. So those kind of gig economic sectors really open up a lot of opportunities for women again, technology becoming a great enabler there as well. So that cultural shift can happen, because of some of these systemic changes that we are going to experience.
Thank you very much. So I think we are done at the panel here, but I'll throw the floor open for any questions, comments. If you can be brief on that, and if you have any specific questions specifically targeted to any of the panelists, then you can possibly name that and say that I want Ms. Aziz to answer or Ms. Shrutri to answer. Then I guess it will become easier. Otherwise, we'll have to fend for ourselves and find out who can better answer that. Please. You are not audible, sir. Yeah, seems to be working now. Yes, it's working.
My question has two parts basically. Rather, it's a concern and may take you slightly away from the technology part of it.
Okay.
See, the clusters that we are talking about are obviously mainly in the rural belt. And mostly they are women and they belong to very humble and very poor background.
Sure.
So what is happening is the large buying houses or the exporters, they visit them directly. They maybe give them some money in advance or a raw material to make, and then the buyback understanding is there. Basically what they are doing is a job work. They are not developing as an entrepreneur. So one, what can be done in this space? The second part of my question is that due to all these obvious reasons, the coming generation doesn't want to be in the same business, same craft they don't want to learn. They want to just move away from there. And so what collectively that we can do to support them, to guide them, and wherein your technology or digital can come in when they are actually surviving and they don't want to think about learning anything more.
Tribal families in 9 different states across the country, and we have some of our tribal entrepreneurs right here, women entrepreneurs who've come from Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, who are essentially into what is called bamboo weaving and bamboo products. Bamboo is a very sustainable material, probably the most sustainable material on earth. So if we have, for example, this table here, and the legs that you see here, which are made out of steel, could easily be made out of very natural material called bamboo. You have baskets, you have trays, you have jugs, mugs, you have speaker, which means sound enhancers and so on and so forth. So when we went to these 9 states where we are currently working, we did realize that most of the work, you rightly said, is essentially got done by the traders through these artisans, who in turn essentially do what is called job work. So a trader gives the order, and in a week just picks up as much production has been there, and then goes and sells it. But one thing which sort of was our initial strategy was to help them move from their existing product range to a new product range. And most of the products that they were making were essentially traditional baskets, which were then sold in the local Haat Bazaar. What means that you produce whatever, you sell it during the same week on Friday or Saturday or whichever way. But using the same weaving skills, you could actually help them move from making agricultural baskets to lampshades. You just put a holder in that and a bulb, and that's done. You could then also use the same bamboo by cutting it in a much better fashion and make sure that it doesn't catch fungus by doing simple treatment. So small changes could lead them to what is called improvement in the product range, and about 300 such people have actually been exposed to the high-end level of production, which means better skills, better technology, better tools, and so on and so forth. And the second point which you said is then to link it up with these kind of bigger buyers who are interested in this sophisticated range of products and are willing to give much better money for the same amount of work that they do in a day. And the example which I was quoting to you in Jharkhand, Dumka, is essentially of such approximately 6,000 artisans who are all from the tribal families, whose average income has actually been increased to from 1484 rupees to about 5,000 now. And that's in a space of 4 years. And a lot of people have actually been now making money to the range of 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 rupees per month, I am saying. And that's because the product range is different. It actually may mean that the skills are same, the raw material is the same, but practically speaking, the product is entirely different, the market is different, the tools which they use is different, the skills which they are now using is a more upgraded one. So it's actually, from our point of view, a completely new business altogether. And if you are able to get that done even with 200 people in a cluster of 5,000 people, it actually starts what is called a virtuous cycle. The 200 people then start teaching another 200 and another 200 and then another 200. And that's what actually has happened. It's not that we have been able to reach out to all of them, but if you can just expose a few of them, then they are all connected with each other in terms of their family circumstances and so on and so forth. And that's why we essentially work on clusters, because in a cluster, if you start a virtuous cycle, it creates what is called a spiral effect. With that, I'll stop. Any more questions? Please. Yes, you are loud enough, sure.
I'm a nascent entrepreneur. It's just been 5 years in finding my own way. Interestingly, I realize when you talk about NASCOM and MSME Cluster Foundation, I hardly see a place where a woman entrepreneur can find all sorts of organizations or facilities or digitalization. I, being educated, a global traveler facilitator, I'm still grappling to find, like you were talking about Shruti Niti Ayog, I have no clue what it is. I've already made a note of it now. So firstly, when you talk about digitalization, when India can pass a COVID message, which is not actually COVID, and frighten the whole country so powerfully on a WhatsApp, what are we doing where a woman entrepreneur, either an educated one like me or from a rural who just believes on a WhatsApp, how do I find everything in one place? Do we have a registration where a woman entrepreneur has to register? Doesn't matter whether you're a rural, urban, private, a sole or proprietorship. I am grappling. And today I was very keen to attend this session because this is something I'm really finding difficult. So what is it that you plan to do in the next few years where we as women entrepreneurs, and that's for UNIDO as well, where everything is in one place, like FIWE, WIEF, there are so many women entrepreneurs. Where are we registered in one place that I can get the benefit? So what is your take on this? And that's a question for all the three of you, if you can answer that, please.
Even I'm in the same thing what she is saying, even educated, good background, but still I'm also not aware why I'm talking about the lower class of women entrepreneur in a rural area. Even I'm not, it's I think these schemes are not publicized enough at any level. These are only few people, around 500, 5,000 in a population which is 1.4 billion. That is what, and we publicize these figures about that 5,000 people are aware of it. Is it good enough? I am really surprised.
Yes, I can see the pain, and it clearly points to people in marketing and communications probably not doing their job well enough. So I'm gonna take that feedback back and see what we can do. But there are platforms that actually, like what you were saying, one place where you will find everything that a woman entrepreneur needs. And I would encourage you to actually look at Niti Aayog, because they have a platform called WEP, which is Women Entrepreneurship Platform, where um, they are trying to mentor women entrepreneurs, provide them with multiple opportunities, see how they can upscale them. And similarly, NASCOM Foundation actually works with the Niti Aayog on that particular initiative. Other than that, too, we realize that that is the problem. What you mention is the problem, and you're talking about this demographic, which is educated, who can read. You can actually research and find such schemes. Uh, our challenge is that we have to look at this demographic and also that which can't read probably, and
Shruti, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Disturbing in between. Niti Aayog, that WEP scheme which you are talking, that has only 400 views. I have seen there. If you are talking about that scheme, if that is so publicized, that is only 100, 400 views. That is also some of the good entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it has 20 views, 30 views. So I'm saying even that schemes are not publicized.
no, so maybe views what you're talking about is on a particular post, but it's there, and you're right. Probably a lot of people don't know about it, but then that's maybe for some of us to take back and work out a system where organizations like FIWE probably and others in the sector need to be brought together, and the same. I think we live in an era where everybody is doing a lot of things in silos, and so somebody needs to actually bring everybody together to say that, okay, let's see, what are you doing, how can we help, and how can we get it to people who need it, and I take it as feedback, and I will go and look at how people can access our programs more. We realize it's a challenge, and we are working on it actually.
Yeah, I would like to make a comment on this. Well, there was a time when we had a single point registration in the country. And the single point registration helped women to take everything from a single window. That has been closed down long back. Well, the government had done it. The ICs were following it, and the government of India was following it. The Ministry of Small Scale was following it. But since like everything got changed to MSME, the single point registration could not come further. Yeah, and then Udyam registration came up. Now, Udyam registration, I have no idea what actually they want. They just want people to come forward and say that, okay, we have done so many number of thousands and lakhs of registration. If that is, yes, it is happening. But as such, I don't think that there is any benefit out of it. And I have spoken at number of platforms about these things, that single point registration should come up again for women, going to the bank, going for registration with NSIC, going for though NSIC says we have single point registration, but it's not effective. Because for everything, for exhibition, you have to again go to MSME. For another thing, you have to go to again another place. So it's not like, see, I went to USA, and within a week, I was able to register my company. Within a week, a private limited company. Why can't we have it in India? I mean, we are following so many things. Hundreds and lakhs of rupees are spent on sending our officers abroad and getting exposed and trained and everything. But we don't follow which are supposed to be followed here. We follow all those high-tech things which are not actually taking us any further. It is taking some percentage of people, but not for the major percentage. So this is to be looked into it. I'm so sorry that there is no policy maker here today now. Otherwise, we wanted to say, but we are going to give these recommendations after the conference is over, that this is what we are looking at.
In the evening, the minister is coming. Maybe you should put up that point to him. He's new. He would be looking for new opportunities to
I hope
feedback
so.
would be helpful.
I hope so, because the last minute turnout of secretary was so, again, it was so disappointing. So I'm just crossing my finger.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we should.
Just like to make a point. I'll take 1 minute. Now, I'm an ex-policy maker. I retired from Government of India in 2014. Now, I had worked in the MSME sector, so I know about the SSI and the DIC registration. It was the entrepreneurs themselves who got it done away with. So sometimes they said ki we don't want it, make it free. This is what actually happened, Rajni, and there was so much of pressure on government that they said ki khatam karo, it is not essential, but sometimes, you know, for individual benefits, people do put something good, do away with something good. It was a good thing because at least you had one place, the district industry center, where a person could go to. I was Commissioner Director Industries also, Joint Director Industries also. So where the problems could be discussed and could be taken up by a responsible officer for to helping the entrepreneur out. It was a development program. Anyway, what is what's over and done with is over and done with. Now, Sachin, I have to make a small suggestion to you, because you were saying that this cultural change will take a long time. Now you have to build it into your program and push it forward. Make it a part of your program. Draw attention to it. It is, you know, as Shruti said, we are working in silos. I'll tell you, I established this department for disabilities, empowerment of persons with disabilities, and we have a lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations who are running special schools. So they are doing it on charity basis. Since I have this 12, 14 years of industrial experience with me, I said, look, you're a social entrepreneur. You are not a welfare organization. Change your mindset. But they had no means of getting hold of the philosophy of social entrepreneurship. So you have to build it. I requested NISBAT, being ex-director NISBAT, please do this thing, please marry the two concepts. So you had to push it in. There was a resistance from the NGO sector because they said, we've been doing charity for donkey's years, why should we change now? I said, you have to understand, there is a difference between profiteering and sustainability. So you have to work with them. And then again with disabled people, you know, you have to realize entrepreneurship is the only way out for them because they are isolated. 3% population, and maybe with the new act, they'll go up to 5 or 7%. Isolated, locked up in homes, logistics are not there. So setting up of small enterprises is the only solution. Technology helps, but technology can be a disruptor, as I later discovered in the child sector. But where are the projects? Where is the technology suitable for people? There's so much of diversity in the disability sector. So we have to also find those projects. I mean, I knew because I had worked in the field, something like chalk making can be done at home. But that was long time ago. I saw it in the 80s or something. How do you tell a person who is making paper flowers, you know? It's so difficult marketing paper flowers, you know. You have to get into products which are market-oriented, or an NGO. We stop teaching these skills. It's all right for teaching cognitive skills and all. But get into projects, get into industry demand-driven products. So these are the sort of challenges, but I started with Sachin. Don't wait for cultural change to come in. Push in, engender that cultural change. Talk to people about it. You know, at first people resist, but that change comes once you talk on every platform that you get. I'll tell you again, sorry, I'm just taking 2 minutes. As chairperson of this National Child Rights Commission, I was horrified by the child abuse that was on. When I first spoke about it, people sort of almost booed me off the stage. But today they're talking about it. 3 years. It just took 3 years, and my constant, you know, hammering at that subject. Child marriage. Today the rate has gone down. Just 3 years, you know, you have to build awareness. Yeah. Talk about it. Talk about the cultural change and make it part of your agenda.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think now we have Rupali waiting for us to
Sir, one
close.
small question.
I think we have to ask the organizers, because we are already 12 minutes past and the lunch is, logistics have to be managed by them. So I, as a chairperson, would like to close and thank the panelists here and leave it to the organizers to
Thank
they
you.
want to carry
Thank
on.
you. Yeah, we support Sir in that because we'll be getting late for lunch and we have very important sessions coming up along with, fingers crossed, the Minister joining us in the evening for the award presentation ceremony. And so you can, all our eminent speakers will be there with us. You can interact with them on one-to-one basis during the lunch hour. And now requesting ma'am to do the honors of presenting a token of gratitude to all our eminent speakers. We begin with the chairperson, Mr. Mukesh Gulati ji. And thank you, sir, for last minute pitching in and doing the favors to Mr. Sachin Joshi. So in this women's forum, let's begin with honoring the men. To Ms. Rizani Aziz, ma'am, it's an honor to have you here with us. And to Ms. Shruti Das, thank you very much indeed, ma'am, for being here with us. And can we have a group photograph of the panel, please? So once again, inviting everybody for lunch and lunch hour. There's some wonderful stuff there. And we need to promote these budding entrepreneurs and whatever they are doing. And please be back and be seated before 2:30 for the next session. Thank you.
There's one in the harems, right? Yeah, you wanted exactly this one?
काम कीजिए, आपका दुपट्टा अलग मिलता है, मेरे को 2 दुपट्टा दीजिए। इंसान बस सीधा सा काम क्योंकि मेरे घर में 2 बहन है, एक किल लूँगा दूसरी पकड़े पीटेगी।
बताइए कौन सा वो
वाली साइड की दोनों दे दीजिए, एक वाली और वो।